Imagine a homeowner returning to their property in Dallas or Houston, only to find the locks changed, their belongings in the trash, and a stranger sitting in their living room claiming squatters' rights. Until very recently, the legal system in the Lone Star State offered these homeowners a nightmare of red tape, forcing them into civil court battles that lasted months while they continued to pay the mortgage, taxes, and insurance for a home they could not enter. But as of January 1st, 2026, the rules of engagement have fundamentally shifted. Texas has officially declared a legislative war on unauthorized occupants, effectively in the era of the serial squatter, with a pair of hammer-blow laws known as Senate Bill 38 and Senate Bill 1333. This is no longer a slow-moving civil dispute. It is a high-stakes confrontation between the rights of the deed holder and the desperation of an underclass caught in a historic housing squeeze. As the Docket takes effect across the state's justice courts, Texas is sending a clear message to the nation. In 2026, your home is once again your castle, and the state has just reinforced the moat. The architecture of this legal counteroffensive is built upon two distinct pillars that address the crisis from both the criminal and civil perspectives. The first strike came with Senate Bill 1333, which quietly took effect in late 2025, providing a fast track for law enforcement to intervene in cases of clear, unauthorized entry. This law transformed squatting from a frustrating civil matter into a prosecutable criminal offense, specifically targeting the use of fraudulent documents. Under this new framework, if an individual presents a fake lease or a forged deed to claim residency, they are no longer just a tenant in dispute. They are committing a Class A misdemeanor, and if they attempt to sell or rent that property to another unsuspecting victim, the charge escalates to a first-degree felony. More importantly, SB 1333 allows property owners to file a sworn affidavit directly with sheriff or constable, who then has the authority to immediately investigate and remove the intruder without waiting for a judge's signature on a traditional eviction order. This represents a seismic shift in the balance of power, moving the primary actor from the slow-moving courtroom to the front lines of law enforcement. However, the real war began on New Year's Day 2026 with the implementation of Senate Bill 38, authored by State Senator Paul Betancourt. This law was born out of a realization that the squatter problem was significantly larger than previously estimated. During the legislative sessions leading up to 2026, testimony revealed that there were nearly 500 active squatter cases in Dallas alone, and hundreds more in a single constable precinct in Harris County. Betancourt noted that individual homeowners were being systematically preyed upon by serial squatters who had mastered the loopholes of the previous system. SB 38 addresses this by creating what is being called a docket for the justice of the peace courts. Under the new rules, once a property owner files an affidavit proving ownership and demonstrating that the occupants are trespassing, the courts are mandated to act within a strict window of 10 to 21 days. This effectively eliminates the free ride that squatters previously enjoyed, which often lasted 3 to 4 months as they exploited the backlog of the Texas judicial system. To understand why this war became necessary, one must look at the staggering data surrounding the Texas housing market in early 2026. While Texas has historically been lauded for its affordability compared to coastal hubs like California, that edge has been dramatically eroded. U.S. Census data released in early 2026 confirms that while Texas incomes rose by approximately 3.1% over the last 5 years, housing costs surged by over 9.1%. This has left more than half of the state's 4.1 million renters cost-burdened, meaning they spend over 30% of their gross income just to keep a roof over their heads. In high-growth areas like Houston, the pressure has reached a boiling point. In February 2025, Houston landlords filed over 6,500 eviction cases, a figure 53% higher than pre-pandemic averages. Harris County alone saw 76,321 eviction filings in 2024, representing about 1 in every 10 renter households in the region. This atmospheric pressure, high rent, and low supply created a vacuum that many desperate individuals attempted to fill by moving into vacant or abandoned properties, often belonging to elderly owners or out-of-state investors who were not present to monitor their holdings. The human cost of 2026 system is exemplified by the harrowing stories that fueled the passage of these laws. In Mesquite, a homeowner named Terry Boyette found herself unable to live in her own home for months after a squatter moved in while she was away. When she finally regained possession, she found a landscape of ruin, piles of trash, rotting food, and drug paraphernalia that cost thousands to remediate. Another Dallas property owner, Nira Truong, spent nearly 4 months and thousands of dollars in legal fees just to remove an occupant who was causing visible damage to her investment. These owners were often told by police that the matter was civil, leaving them in a state of financial and emotional paralysis. SB 38 was designed specifically to end this anxiety cycle by limiting the scope of eviction hearings to the single issue of possession. In 2026, a squatter can no longer stall a case by bringing up unrelated counterclaims about property damage or title disputes. Those must now be filed in separate proceedings, allowing the owner to reclaim the physical structure within weeks. The penalties for those who damage property during an illegal occupation have also been weaponized. Under the revised Texas Penal Code, if a squatter causes property damage value between $1,000 and $300,000 while trespassing, the offense is now classified as a second-degree felony. This is a direct response to the scorched earth policy often employed by squatters who, upon realizing they're about to be evicted, destroy plumbing, strip copper wiring, or spray paint interiors. The 2026 laws ensure that the cost of such destruction is no longer just a financial loss for the owner, but a significant prison sentence for the perpetrator. Furthermore, the state has authorized sheriffs and constables to collect fees from property owners for the immediate execution of removals, creating a self-sustaining funding model for these specialized squatter units within law enforcement. Yet, as the state declares victory for property rights, housing advocates and legal aid groups are raising urgent alarms about the collateral damage of this war. Organizations like Building and Strengthening Tenant Action, or BASTA, argue that the blurred lines between a true squatter and a struggling tenant could lead to a wave of wrongful evictions. They point out that the Docket system reduces the time for a legitimate tenant to prepare a defense, potentially punishing families who have fallen behind on rent due to medical emergencies or job losses. In 2026, the definition of a squatter is being pushed to its legal limit. Senator Betancourt has even suggested that after several months of non-payment and lease violations, a regular tenant effectively takes on elements of a squatter. This rhetoric has led critics to fear that the new laws are less about removing home invaders and more about providing landlords with a bypass around traditional tenant protections. The legal risks for property owners who misuse these new tools are equally severe. If a landlord falsely identifies a legal tenant as a squatter to trigger an immediate removal under SB 1333, they open themselves up to massive civil liability. A wrongfully removed occupant is entitled to sue for 3 times the fair market rent, actual damages, and all attorney fees. This serves as a failsafe to prevent the law from being used as a weapon by property flippers or unlicensed landlords who wish to clear a building quickly for sale without going to the proper channels. The state is essentially placing a high-stakes bet on the honesty of the affidavit system, counting on the threat of perjury and triple damages to keep the peace between the two warring factions of a housing crisis. Texas is not alone in this legislative pivot. The state's 2026 strategy draws clear inspiration from Florida's House Bill 621, which similarly empowered sheriffs to remove unauthorized occupants. However, the Texas approach is arguably more aggressive in its restructuring of the entire judicial timeline. By standardizing notice requirements and allowing for electronic delivery of eviction notices via email, the state has modernized the process for an era where physical service can be easily evaded. In 2026, the improper notice technicality, which previously saved thousands of occupants from eviction, has been largely neutralized. Landlords now have a clear, multi-channel path to notify occupants, and the courts are forbidden from rejecting petitions based on minor paperwork errors, provided they meet the state's standardized criteria. As we move through the first quarter of 2026, the broader impact on the Texas real estate market is beginning to manifest. Real estate investors are viewing the state with renewed optimism, as the risk of a lost year due to a squatter has been drastically reduced. However, this increased efficiency in the eviction process is occurring at the same time that Texas is seeing a record high foreclosure rate in certain metros, with Lakeland and Cape Coral leading a similar trend in the South. The normalization of the housing market in 2026 means that while owners are protected from squatters, they are still vulnerable to the broader economic forces of inflation and rising insurance premiums. The 2026 Texas budget reflects this tension, as lawmakers scramble to balance property tax relief with the need to fund the very resilience hubs and social services required for those displaced by the state's increasingly efficient eviction machine. Ultimately, the war on occupiers in Texas represents a profound reassertion of the traditional American social contract regarding property. It is a recognition that when a citizen can no longer rely on the state to protect their most valuable asset, their home, the foundation of the local economy begins to crumble. The 1.2 million Americans now living in their cars across the nation are a testament to the severity of the housing shortage. But Texas has decided that the solution to homelessness cannot include the involuntary seizure of private residences. As the Docket clears the courts and sheriffs execute immediate removals under SB 1333, the state is attempting to find an equilibrium between compassion and consequence. The data of 2026 tells a story of a state under pressure, where 50% of renters are struggling, yet 100% of owners are now armed with the most powerful legal tools in the country. The battle lines are drawn, the laws are in effect, and the Texas way of handling property disputes has entered a new, uncompromising era. Whether this war results in safer neighborhoods or a surge in the working homeless remains a defining question of 2026. One thing is certain. In the state of Texas, the era of the freeloading squatter has officially come to an end.